I remember the first time I met her mom. Not just the setting, the mismatched chairs in her kitchen, the smell of coffee that had been left on the burner too long, but the expression on her face. That flicker behind the eyes that said, "This one won't last." It was the summer of 2012. Emily had invited me to her parents' house in Connecticut after 4 months of dating. I was nervous in that eager, stupid way a man gets when he thinks he's finally found something worth keeping. She held my hand the whole train ride, tracing lazy circles on my palm with her thumb, and I read too much into that gesture. Thought it meant security, intimacy, permanence. When we walked into the kitchen, her mom didn't even stand up. She just gave me a once-over from her place at the table, sipping burnt coffee from a mug that said, "Don't talk to me until this is empty." "This is Daniel," Emily said, a hint of cheer in her voice. "I told you about him." Her mom blinked slowly. Then, and what exactly do you do, Daniel?" The exactly wasn't casual. It was a scalpel. I told her I was a freelance designer, mostly branding work back then, logos, website templates. I tried to explain that I was building a client list, that it was growing. She gave a tight, polite smile and said, "Ah, so no benefits." Emily rolled her eyes and tugged me toward the stairs. "Ignore her," she whispered. But I couldn't. Not fully. Not when, later that evening, as we sat outside on the back patio, I overheard her mom talking to her dad in the next room. "He seems fine," she said. "But he's not husband material. You can tell. No plan. No roots." Emily defended me. I'll give her that. I remember her voice, low but firm. "He's ambitious. He's just building something different." But the words stuck to my ribs. I didn't say anything at the time, didn't want to make it a thing. But I carried them back with me on the train. They echoed in my head on the quiet days, especially when I was pitching clients and getting ghosted or checking my bank account before buying groceries. Not husband material. I think I started trying to prove her wrong before I even knew I was doing it. I over-delivered on projects. Took on contracts I had no business accepting just to look like I was growing. I said yes to everything, everyone. Burned out, got sick, kept pushing. And somewhere in the middle of that grind, Emily and I moved in together. At first, it felt like we were building something solid. She got a steady job at a PR firm. I landed 2 big clients. We celebrated with cheap wine and frozen pizza that we ate on the floor of our new apartment. We thought we were poor and in love and invincible. But cracks formed quietly. She started coming home later. Said she had networking drinks. I didn't question it. I figured that's what people did when they were climbing. Besides, I was always behind on deadlines. It was easy to pretend we were just busy, not distant. Then came the pressure. Her mom, Janet, called often, always with some passive little dig. "Don't work too hard. Someone has to have a steady paycheck in that apartment." Emily would laugh it off, but the tension clung to her when she hung up. And slowly, she started echoing her mother's words. Not in the same tone, but the same rhythm. "Maybe you should think about getting a real job, just for now. You're so talented, babe. But don't you want something more stable?" I heard it for what it was. She was scared, or embarrassed, or maybe both. Still, I tried harder. I booked twice as many projects, even started subcontracting. I figured if I could just break a certain income threshold, all of it, the doubts, the judgment, the distance, would fade. But it never did. We got engaged in the fall of 2017. I thought it was a turning point. I bought a modest ring. Vintage, not flashy, but elegant. She said yes through tears. Said it was perfect. Said she loved me. But when we told her parents over dinner, Janet didn't smile. She just said, "Well, that's fast," and then raised her glass without a toast. I should have known then. Should have felt that shiver of warning down my spine and listened to it. But love makes you hopeful. Makes you foolish. I chalked it up to family weirdness. I told myself she'd come around. Emily assured me she would. "She just needs time," she'd say. "She's protective, but she'll love you when she sees how much you love me." So I waited, and I kept trying. The wedding was small, but tasteful. Janet wore white. Not ivory white. Like she was the bride. Like she was the one being given away. Emily noticed, but didn't say a word. Just stared at her mother during the ceremony, like she was waiting for something. Approval. Validation. I don't know. Afterward, Janet kissed my cheek, smiled that tight smile, and whispered, "Well, here we go." Here we go? 3 words that sounded like a threat, but I pretended they were a blessing. The first year of marriage was quiet, and not in the good way. Emily threw herself into work. I tried to scale my business, opened a tiny studio downtown, hired 2 contractors. Janet called less, but when she did, her voice always sounded surprised when I answered. "Oh, you're still there." Sometimes I wonder if that was her real problem with me. Not my ambition, not my bank account, but the fact that I stayed. That I kept showing up, year after year, in defiance of the narrative she'd written for her daughter. Because when things finally fell apart, it wasn't with shouting or infidelity or some grand betrayal. It was quieter than that. It was the sound of a suitcase zipper at 1 a.m. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If someone asked me when things changed, I don't think I could point to a single moment. No singular fight, no dramatic scene, just a slow erosion, like tide water eating away at a shoreline you thought was solid. Emily stopped waiting up for me. At first, I thought it was the long hours. I was still working from the studio, often late into the night, trying to get my agency past its shaky start. But there were nights I came home earlier than usual, 9, maybe 10, and the lights were already off in the bedroom. No, how was your day? No curled-up body waiting for me under the covers. Just silence. A kind of cold quiet that sank deeper than loneliness. I missed her even when she was in the same room. She scrolled more, talked less. I noticed her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore, and when I asked if she was okay, she'd brush it off. "I'm just tired. Work's been intense." "I'm fine, really." But the distance between us stretched until it was something we didn't know how to cross. And still, I tried. I planned small things, a weekend getaway, surprise takeout from her favorite place, even an impromptu picnic in the living room with candles and old records playing in the background. She smiled. She participated, but her eyes always looked elsewhere. One night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen island. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning up, wiping the counter, moving her charger. That's when I saw the message. Just one line from a man named Andrew. "Tonight was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't click. I didn't need to. My stomach knew the truth before my brain let it in. Still, I told myself maybe it was a client. Maybe a misunderstanding. A joke. Anything. I asked her about him the next day, carefully, like I was tiptoeing into a house already on fire. "Who's Andrew?" She blinked too long. That pause. Barely a second, but heavy. Then, "Just someone from work." Her voice was too calm. "Practiced." "Why?" I shrugged. "Saw a message pop up when I was moving your laptop." She didn't get defensive. That was the worst part. She didn't argue. Didn't accuse me of being paranoid. She just said, "I'll be more careful next time," and walked away. More careful. Not more honest. I didn't bring it up again. Couldn't. Some part of me still hoped I was wrong. That I was imagining the growing space between us. That the woman I married wouldn't do something like that. That she loved me enough not to. But Emily was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. Then Janet started calling again. At first, it was just for Emily, quick, routine check-ins. But one afternoon, she called me directly. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft, almost different. "Can we talk?" I assumed she wanted help planning something for Emily's birthday, or maybe had a question about the anniversary party we'd canceled during the pandemic. But she surprised me. "I know things aren't easy right now," she said. I was silent, unsure whether this was a trap or genuine concern. "I may have misjudged you," she continued. "When you first came into the picture, I thought you weren't what Emily needed. I thought she needed someone more traditional, secure, someone with benefits," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed softly. "Something like that." Then she sighed, and I heard something I hadn't before. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. "But you've been steady. You've tried. I see that now." I didn't know what to say. It was the first time she'd ever offered me anything close to approval, and it landed like a cold pebble dropped in a dry well. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you probably know." "Don't thank me," she replied. "Just take care of yourself, no matter what happens." When I hung up, I sat in my car outside the studio for a long time, just staring at the steering wheel, feeling something tighten in my chest. She knew, or at least suspected, and the fact that Janet, the woman who once said I wasn't husband material, was now warning me, quietly, gently, to brace myself. That was the moment I knew for sure. I was losing my marriage. The funny thing about slow declines is that they don't prepare you for the final drop. You think you'll see it coming, that there'll be some dramatic moment, a shouted confession, a suitcase on the porch. But it wasn't like that. It was an empty closet. I came home one evening, and half the hangers were bare. Her dresser drawers, half full. One toothbrush left in the holder. A note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm sorry. I just can't do this anymore." No explanation. No phone call. Just gone. I sank to the floor, the tile cold against my back, and I stared at the ceiling until it blurred. Not husband material. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I spent so much time trying to prove her wrong that I forgot to ask if I was happy too. If I was being loved the way I deserved. But the part that hurt most wasn't Emily leaving. It was realizing that the only person who still called me, who still checked in, even after everything, was her mother, Janet, the woman who never thought I was good enough. The only one who hadn't disappeared. It took me 6 months to return her call. Janet left voicemails at first, short, measured, respectful. "Just checking in, Daniel. No pressure to call back. Hope you're okay." And I wasn't. Not really. I moved out of the apartment within the month. Too many shadows. Too many silent corners that used to hold laughter. I stayed with a friend, then rented a small one-bedroom above a bakery. The kind of place where the walls are thin and the smells are warm. It helped, in a strange way. Waking up to the scent of cinnamon rolls. Being anonymous in a neighborhood where no one knew I used to be someone's husband. I told people we grew apart. It was easier than saying I came home to half an empty closet and a note with no signature. I didn't see Emily again. Not at the bank, not at the store, not even on social media. She disappeared as if she'd rehearsed it, like she'd been planning her exit for longer than I ever realized. Friends we'd shared stopped calling, some out of loyalty to her. Others, I think, just didn't want to choose. But Janet kept calling. She didn't ask me questions I wasn't ready to answer. She didn't press. She just kept showing up in small, persistent ways. One day, I finally picked up. It was a Tuesday, and I was standing in the parking lot of the post office, holding a package I didn't remember ordering. The sun was warm, and something in the quiet steadiness of her voice just cracked through. "I'm here," I said. There was a pause on her end, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, gently, "I know. We talked for nearly an hour that day. Not about Emily, not really. Janet told me about her garden. About how the tomatoes hadn't taken this year. About a book she was reading that she didn't quite like, but felt compelled to finish. She told me about her dog, Charlie, who was getting older but still barked at the UPS guy like he owed him money. And I just listened. Something strange happens when the only person who calls you is the one you always assumed didn't want you. It shifts things, softens them. You stop looking for the reasons they disliked you and start noticing the quiet ways they tried, maybe failed, but tried, to connect. She invited me over for dinner. I almost said no. I nearly deleted the text. But there was something in me that didn't want to let go of the only remaining thread of that life. The part that hadn't turned away. I showed up on a Sunday. Same kitchen. Same mismatched chairs. Same burnt coffee smell. She looked older. Not just in the usual way, but in the weight of it all way. The way someone looks when they've watched their daughter walk away from a man they didn't think was enough, only to realize he was the only one who stayed. We didn't talk about the marriage. Not directly. She set down 2 plates of roast chicken and said, "I never knew how hard it was to be right and still be so wrong." I didn't ask her to explain. I just nodded. Over time, the visits became more regular. Not frequent, but enough. She'd send me leftovers in old Tupperware. I'd fix her leaky faucet. She'd call me when Charlie got sick and needed a ride to the vet. Somewhere along the way, the edges between us softened. One day, she handed me a box. Said it was Emily's. Things she didn't come back for. "I thought maybe you should have them," she said. Inside was a photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. It had pictures from the first year, Polaroids of our first Christmas, our terrible attempt at baking cookies, our weekend trip to Maine. There was a sticky note on the last page, in Emily's handwriting. I wanted this to work. No punctuation, just that one line. I sat on Janet's porch for a long time after that. We didn't say anything, just listened to the wind in the trees. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door and said something I'll never forget. "I was wrong about you. Not because you turned out better than I expected, but because I didn't see the kind of strength that stays. The kind that doesn't walk away." I wanted to tell her it wasn't strength, that it was just inertia, that sometimes staying feels easier than leaving, even if you're hurting. But I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself, about being the last one standing after the storm, the one who stayed behind, the one who kept calling, even when it would have been easier to pretend I was never there. And that's the strange, sad poetry of it. Her mom said I wasn't husband material. And maybe I wasn't, but I was still there when everyone else disappeared. And somehow, that's the only thing that mattered in the end.